Hi, and welcome back to another edition in What's New in Jenkins. My name is Darren Pope. I am a developer advocate for CloudBees, and today we're talking about what's new in Jenkins LTS 319.2. It's hard to remember all the numbers. Mark,
It is.
welcome
That's
back.
a lot of digits.
It's a lot of digits, but it's not as a lot of digits as some of the plugins now. We might talk about that just a little bit.
Yes.
By the way, if you don't know who Mark is on the governance board for the Jenkins project, as well as being the documentation officer, as well as chief bottle washer, maybe? I'm not sure. I've lost track now.
yes, I definitely wash bottles. I'm glad you got that one correct. Bottle washing is an important part of my role.
Okay. So here we are again, 6 weeks later this time, due to this thing called the holidays.
Right.
So the project decided, let's take a break for 2 weeks. And that's why it's been 6 weeks since then. We should be on a normal release schedule from this point forward for at least the foreseeable future, right?
Right. The Jenkins calendar actually has been updated to show the schedule, and 4 weeks from now we'll release .3. 4 weeks after that we'll release the next LTS baseline. It'll just keep going. Yep.
Okay. Until a holiday happens again. And then we'll figure it out.
Right. Exactly. until something comes along that makes us reconsider schedules.
Yep. So just in case people haven't joined us before, and we're talking about this Jenkins LTS, or we haven't said it yet, but Jenkins Weekly, which there is a weekly release of Jenkins every Tuesday-ish. Except for this week, there were actually two. We'll talk about that as well. Maybe, maybe not. What is a Jenkins LTS?
Yeah, so Jenkins long-term support releases are releases that are delivered once every month. We, every 3 months, choose a baseline. The baseline release is then used as the sounding board or the platform for series of releases that will happen every month thereafter. So at the start of a 3-month period, we choose the .1. It becomes the baseline, and then we backport changes to it for .2 and .3, sometimes even a .4, and on a particularly bad cycle, sometimes there's a .5.
But not this time.
No, not this time.
I think we'll be staying with a .3 this time, I hope.
Right,
I
and
really,
we stayed
hope
with
so.
a .3 on the last round, and as we get better, the usual pattern for when we needed a .4 was Mark Waite made a terrible mistake at something. That was the last cause of a .4, was I made a really dumb mistake. And so we're making fewer dumb mistakes, and as we make fewer dumb mistakes, we're much more sensible.
Okay. So, Mitya, good to see you as well. Happy New Year. By the way, we haven't said that yet. Happy New Year. This is the first time we're back since. Or did we say it and I already forgot?
No, it is. This is a good time to say Happy New Year.
Okay. Do you want to go and get into the changelog?
Sure, let's do it.
It's a little short this time.
It
Sort of.
is.
Sort of. Because this is not as the changelog item, which we would expect for a .2 and a .3. Anything beyond the .1, we expect a shorter. We really hope that it's a shorter changelog, right?
Correct, right. So a .2 should just be those things which needed to be fixed in the .1.
Right.
And so therefore you really expect .2 and .3 are relatively short. And in this case, only 2 items, and the 2 items are relatively minor, both of them. The trim labels operation, if you've got a really large installation, this might be important to you because there were cases where operations being performed on agents, so if you've got 100 or 1,000 agents, that might actually be relevant to you. The other one, the file path telemetry, is as part of a security fix that we did in 2.303.2 or .3, we added some safeguards against client to controller operations. As part of our assessing, can we stop doing those entirely? We've added telemetry. And this change improves what we're doing in that telemetry. It doesn't take it away, it just improves how we're doing it so we get better data from the telemetry. We'll continue collecting that telemetry for that particular question until March of 2022. Then the telemetry collection stops, and we'll use that information to decide if it's safe to turn off this agent to controller access path.
Right. And did we go into depth on that last?
I don't
Or
know
whenever
that
we
we
talked
went
about
into great depth, but we certainly have a conversation that we can have about what it means. The agent to controller subsystem is described, and it's actually very good to see.
Okay. Now, we said there's just two things, and that's true. There are only two things, but there's that very first bullet. That's a larger circle.
Right, and it should be a larger circle, right? When it says security fix and has a hyperlink that says security advisory, everyone should click that, and they should read what that security advisory says.
And this is the security advisory right here.
This is it. Now, on this one, I have to sort of explain to people that this one's actually relatively smaller on Jenkins Core. The Jenkins Core change that's here is actually not a big deal for most people. So scroll down a little bit, Darren, and let's look at the Jenkins Core story. So it's just one item. It's this very top one.
It is, okay. So it's the CSRF and build triggers, right?
Exactly. So there's a cross-site request forgery vulnerability in build triggers. But it's important to see the context where this thing might occur. So the security team is very good about precise descriptions, and their descriptions mean it. It says, when no security realm is set. Now, if you're running Jenkins with no security realm set, that means you're allowing anybody to do anything. Allowing anybody to do anything is already a disaster. And it's not the default, and it's not been the default in Jenkins for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So there is no reason for you to run with security realm disabled. You should have at least username password required to get in. So this one, yes, it's a real vulnerability, and the vulnerability is real, and the security team did exactly the right thing in disclosing and saying, hey, we've got this fix. But in terms of practical impact on Jenkins users themselves, quite small.
Hey, don't tell anybody. I have one running that doesn't have any kind of authentication on it.
I'm going to guess it's behind a firewall, and I'm going to guess that it might even only allow localhost. I mean, yes, there are those kinds of things. My debug versions, but they actually allow exactly only localhost. So yeah, there are times when you don't have a security realm, and they're rare and safeguarded, we hope.
Very much so, yes. In fact, it's somewhere underneath this desk where I'm at right now.
Right, and that's the whole physical security is a good way to protect something like that.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the only core chain, or the core vulnerability, if you will, correct?
Right.
That has been resolved with 319.2.
That's correct.
And also in LTS 330, excuse me, weekly 330.
That's right. So the pattern there is we know that some users choose to use weekly, and we fully support that. But we want them to know that, yes, the most recent weekly has this fix. So 2.330 includes all the changes up to 2.329 plus exactly this one fix.
Right. Okay. Well, scroll back up to the top, because that's actually fairly boring, what we just talked about.
Right.
Right. We shouldn't have Jenkins servers setting out no authentication. That's just what it is. But this is a reasonably long list in comparison to some previous security findings, correct?
It is, and it's a list with some differences that, for fun, we're going to look at the color of the things on your screen as a hint. Notice that Batch Task plugin, Debian Package Builder plugin, and Publish over SSH plugin don't have hyperlinks. They are that darker color.
Yeah.
They have been suspended from distribution because the vulnerabilities are severe enough in them that the security team said, we're no longer going to distribute this thing. Yes, it's still available for download if you go to the artifact repository. Yes, the history is still there. But when a plugin has severe enough security issues that the security team deems it's no longer reasonable to distribute this thing, they will actually stop the distribution. So in my plugin manager, if I try to find the plugin, Publish over SSH, it will no longer appear because I can't get it through the plugin manager.
Do you want to talk about what's the deeper why behind that?
Yeah, so the deeper why there is that the Publish over SSH plugin, actually all three of these plugins, don't have a fix for the vulnerabilities. If they had a fix for the vulnerabilities, there'd be no reason to suspend distribution. But they don't have a fix. Sometimes we have unmaintained plugins. And in this case, these three plugins are unmaintained, and the vulnerability is severe enough that we don't want to risk users installing this thing, even when they see the big warning on the plugin manager that says this thing has a security vulnerability. That's still not enough. We want them to know absolutely we do not want them using these plugins.
Well, we can't actually stop them from using the plugins if they already have them installed.
Correct. Or
Right.
if they download them themselves by going to the URL and downloading them from the
Sideloading it
repository.
and doing whatever.
Absolutely. It's not, and that's a freedom that there are some users who do exactly that kind of thing with other plugins. There's the Team Foundation Server plugin, which has gone through this exact kind of experience, where it had vulnerabilities that were severe enough that the security team suspended distribution. And by suspending distribution, users who said, no, I'm inside a corporate network, I am so well defended, they had to go download it separately because the security team was no longer willing to distribute that plugin.
Okay. So let's take off the sad face and put on the happy face. Let's talk
Right.
about some of the other ones that were actually resolved.
Right, and there are some fun patterns in the others that are resolved. Right, so there are what I'd call some groupings that we might use. So one is there have been missing permission checks, and when we're missing a permission check, that often means somebody can do something that they should not be allowed to do otherwise, and that could be that they could, for instance, in the Bitbucket plugin, the Bitbucket branch source, they could list the credential IDs. And
Yep.
you might say, listing credential IDs, that's okay, that's just a bunch of IDs. And that's fine, except that there's another problem in the plugin that the credential ID could be misused. Credential ID could be misused. And so enumerating credential IDs by itself is not a big deal. But in combination with other attacks, it could be a big deal.
It's like you need to know a username password.
Right.
And
If you don't know the username, the password isn't going to help you. But if
Yep.
if you can list the usernames, now you have a set of valid usernames to attack. Yeah, good example.
Okay. Hey, yay me. I got one today.
Yes.
What's another one? So you talked about that. That was sort of, are there any other sort of brothers or sisters to that one?
Yeah, so credentials binding also has a similar enumeration problem. In this case, credentials binding for a very specific credential type was willing to disclose more information about that credential. It was a secret file than it should have.
Okay.
That's fixed. Mailer also had a form validation issue, again, that would allow you to get more information than you should have. And so that's fixed as well.
Okay. Anything else we need to look at here?
Well, so then there are different topics. So that's
Okay.
missing permission checks. Then
Right.
I'd say on the more interesting side for me is cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, in particular stored cross-site scripting vulnerabilities are interesting because what can happen there is a user enters data into a field that they're allowed to enter data in.
Oh.
And that data is then interpreted in some other user's web browser. And if they put malicious JavaScript and it's not properly sanitized, that victim user may be doing something that they did not expect to be doing. So stored cross-site scripting vulnerabilities are interestingly ugly, let's call it that way. And Matrix Project is one that has it. It's also the badge plugin, and I love my badge plugin. I like that badge plugin a lot.
Okay, help me. I haven't looked at the badge in fact here since we're here. I'm just going to click on this because I don't remember what badge plugin is.
So what the badge plugin does is puts these little icons on the job, exactly, right there. And so what I do is I use the badge plugin to tell me when one of my test jobs is expected to pass and isn't, or is expected to fail and isn't. So it gives me an extra status message, and it's a very immediately visible hint. Oh, here's this badge. And the badge is helpful because it's also got a clickable link. But the description and the clickable link were not properly sanitized, and therefore you could, if you could configure the badges, you could do bad things with them.
Got it. Okay. So stored cross-site scripting.
Right, and of course the publish over SSH plugin also had a stored cross-site scripting vulnerability. So another case of, hey, that's not a great thing.
Okay. What's the other big grouping?
So plain text credential storage is one that causes me, yes, way to go, Darren. Good motion. That was exactly the right way to move. It's like, oh, really? Plain text credentials. Okay, so plain text credentials are oops, we don't like that. And there was a rather narrow one. The metrics plugin would store an access key in plain text. Now, most people won't use access keys with the metrics plugin anyway. Metrics plugin lets you see results for your Jenkins installation. And most people just allow anybody to read them. But if you were using an access system to say, I want to limit who can see which pieces of which, the keys for that were stored plain text. Now, that one's not nearly as scary to me as the Active Directory one.
Okay.
So Active Directory was sending user passwords in plain text under some conditions.
Under some conditions. Interesting.
Right. And that it's the conditions are certainly always interesting, but users should absolutely upgrade their plugin version. If you're an Active Directory user, you should upgrade to this version to assure that you're not affected by it. So the thing here was we really don't want users to be using unencrypted data transfer between their Active Directory server and Jenkins. You want TLS, you want SSL between them anyway.
Right, just like how you would want to have an SSL certificate running on the login form
inside
of Jenkins. You just because you're on the back side, if you will, of Jenkins going to the front side of Active Directory, you really don't want that to be clear text. Does it happen every day? Obviously it does.
Well,
but
I would even go the other way. Does it happen occasionally? Yes, it happens occasionally. We hope that most installations already were using TLS and SSL to secure the communication between Jenkins and their Active Directory server. It just doesn't, it's not healthy to use unencrypted because then you're assuming nobody gets access to your wire. And that assumption is sometimes valid, but in dangerous cases, it may not be valid.
Yep. Okay, so that's Active Directory.
Mm-hmm.
Whew, plain text. So a couple of plain text. What else?
Well, so path traversal is sort of an obscure one in the Warnings Next Generation plugin.
Okay.
There's a path traversal. We just passed it.
Oh, did okay. Sorry.
There it was. It's there. This one. Okay, so I think of this as relatively obscure. I'm not overly worried by it, but I find these kind of things interesting for me. I find them fascinating. All right, so I could create an identifier in the Warnings Next Generation plugin that the identifier then could be stored to the disk using the ID string, using the name of the identifier. And by storing that thing or accessing through it, if I put path separators in there, I could get access to certain files that I probably shouldn't have access to. So the notion then is this one's relatively obscure. It's unlikely, as far as I can tell, to be a serious threat, but you should upgrade to the new version of the Warnings NG plugin, just to be sure.
Okay. Was that the last one, path traversal, or was there one more?
Well, there are other. So there was just right there that you were just there, improper credentials masking that I was fascinated by. That generally, credentials masking to me is a sort of a last-ditch effort to hide something from places where you'd like it not to be exposed. But we do it, right? We work to obscure sensitive things, even if they're placed in log files or placed in build logs. Right. And in this case, there was a situation where something sensitive was not being masked properly.
Okay. So that's only if you're using Vault, HashiCorp Vault specifically.
Correct.
So.
That's right. That was only for the HashiCorp Vault plugin, and yeah, it's notice there it says if you're using it, you need to review your build logs and you need to review your pipeline metadata files. The very last paragraph
right here.
Of that, right? That you need to review your logs if you're using Vault.
And the other part of it is created before this version. So there's all these things have to come together.
Right, exactly.
For that to be true.
Yep, that's the kind of, yeah, so now Vault is very good at rotating credentials.
Yeah.
So this is a great reason to say, maybe it's time to rotate credentials in your Vault.
Yes, unless you're not normally rotating credentials in your Vault, then it's a different conversation.
Right.
I'll say it. If you have a system that allows you to easily rotate credentials, you should be doing that.
I think that's a good thing to say. I like that.
Just because.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, was that it? I think it was, right?
Yeah, the others are less of a concern to me. They're certainly
Right.
They're there and they are a cause for worry, but the ones we've talked about are the ones I thought were most interesting to highlight.
Yeah. And if you look at the distribution curve on this, primarily mediums, a handful of highs.
Yep.
And I don't remember how these map back, but that's okay. And a couple of lows. So the meat of it's medium. Then it goes through all the different affected versions.
Mm-hmm.
Gives you all that. Here's all the fixes. And we were talking about versions earlier. It's like, okay, what is a version? We won't go into this today. Just know that if you're looking at this going, what is that compared to this? Just trust us. It's okay.
That's a good answer. I like that. Just trust
By
us.
the way, if you don't understand what that is, if you go back in the live streams, you will find how many sessions did we do? 5 sessions?
5
sessions.
Yep.
About how to modernize a Jenkins plugin, and this was one of those things that is discussed in depth there. I don't remember which video though.
Yeah, I think it was 4 or 5.
It's towards the end.
Yeah, and it's a really good thing. We appreciate that people may be perplexed by reading that number, but it's a really good thing what that transition means.
Yes. And that sort of leads us to, in modernizing plugins, these 4 plugins don't have a home right now, if you will, right?
They do not. That's correct.
So what's your recommendation here if somebody's watching this and going, I use one of those 4 plugins, or I use a couple of them. What should that person do?
Yeah, so there are 2 or 3 choices, right? So first choice is stop using it, remove it, replace the capability with something else. Publish over SSH, for instance, is a good example where there are actually other ways to do that. And there are ways that are probably better and more maintainable for the user rather than using Publish over SSH. Publish over SSH was last released many years ago. It's okay to say, hey, there are better ways to publish content to other locations. Mm-hmm. You might use the SSH agent plugin and wrap it around an rsync command. There are all sorts of better ways to do that than use that plugin. It's one of those stories of, you know what, sometimes the best thing to do is not use a plugin for a task.
Do you want to say that one more time?
Yeah, sometimes the best thing to do is to not use a plugin to complete the task because it's easier to diagnose, easier to debug, and easier to maintain if you write a little bit of shell script yourself.
Okay, good. I want to say that, could you say that one more time, but I think we've sort of Beat that drum a few times. So.
Yes, that drum has been pounded.
Okay. Then a long credit list here this time too.
It is, and thanks sincerely to the security team for what they've done to you can imagine the challenge of bringing this many fixes all to the Jenkins community at one time. There's an awful lot of coordination with an awful lot of people to do this work.
Yeah. Now, if we go back over to the changelog, one thing we didn't look at yet is the upgrade guide, and let's look at the specific upgrade for this one. Now this goes back to the core fix, like the person to me that doesn't have any kind of authentication turned on.
Right.
Anyone can do anything, right? So now what do I need to do in case I need to do this? Let's say I have, hypothetically, I've got a Jenkins server, anyone can do anything, and I've got a cron job that's remotely triggering the job. Hypothetically.
Okay.
What do I need to do? I mean, obviously it's listed here. First off, I would need a cron, right? If I don't want to set up a user at all and use an API token, I have to do the cron. By the way, have you ever done the cron thing by hand?
I have. I think I've got some scripts that do it, and I always have to go digging out those scripts.
It's not a pleasant.
It is miserable.
It's miserable. That's a great way to put it. It's miserable. So in my case, I am going to have to, make sure my token's set up, and that opens up a whole nother can of worms, but that's okay. That's easy enough to deal with. Or I just put a user on it and just deal with it.
Right.
But this is, if you're running your controller without, let me rephrase that. If you're running your controller with anyone can do anything, and you're externally triggering jobs there today, not any longer you're not, once you upgrade to this.
Right. Your external trigger, as it says there in the very last sentence of that second paragraph, right, you will have to obtain a CSRF CRUM from the CRUM issuer. And yes, there's documentation there. You're going to have to make that request and then provide that, make the request for the CRUM, and then provide that CRUM in your HTTP post request. Yep.
Yeah. But that's the only upgrade guide for this release.
Right.
One little item. So that's good. So is there anything else we need to go through the notes on?
No, that's it for me.
It, right?
Uh-huh.
So we have another release coming out in 4 weeks. In fact, I saw the date. I saw it's February 9th, 10th, whatever that Wednesday is.
Okay.
You're just saying, sure, why not?
I don't remember the date. I know to look at the calendar.
Right. Well, and the reason why I said that, I saw it today, and I've already sort of pre-scheduled this for whatever that Thursday is. So it's on your calendar. Just take a look. And we'll be back for hopefully just the .3. Hopefully there's not a .3 between now and then. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And there shouldn't be.
I'm not aware of anything that would lead us to a .3 in intermediate, and I'd like to have the ability to focus on other things for the next 4 weeks. So I'm not.
You mean
I'm
like
not
the next
for it.
LTS?
Right, like the next LTS.
There's a lot of things in the next LTS.
There are.
Because there's not even, the LTS hasn't been picked yet. Correct?
The baseline has not been chosen yet. That's correct.
But it's probably going to be 330 to 333, I would have to guess.
Well, it will certainly be at least 330 because we don't want to waste the time backporting the 330 fixes.
Correct.
But there are some further UI changes coming that I expect it'll probably be 331 or 332 or maybe even 333. So we've got some interesting things coming, and I love the UI improvements.
Should we do another session just on those UI improvements? Maybe do like once that LTS is picked, which that should be picked in, when's that vote happen?
I'd have to look it up. I think we're 1 or 2 weeks away. I would love to do a session on the UI improvements, but I'd like to wait until next Tuesday when we've got the next weekly, because there's an important fix coming. So the UI improvements that Jan Farachik and that Tim Jacome have made are fascinating and interesting and fun, and we're going to have a lot of joy working with them because they make the product better.
Yep. Do you know if there's going to be other huge changes after that one that's coming next week?
There certainly are more changes pending. I'm not sure if they'll make it for the LTS baseline, The one for next week that I most want, I'm confident we'll make it in, but there are still 2 or 3 significant pull requests that Jan is working on, and that may or may not make it into the March baseline.
Got it. Okay. So in case you want to follow Mark on Twitter, Mark is highly active on Twitter.
Well, okay.
Marky Wait right now at Twitter. By the way, if you haven't subscribed to CloudBees, which you're watching right now, CloudBees TV, go ahead and subscribe there. But once you finish there, if you haven't subscribed to the Jenkins channel, I don't remember what the short URL for that is. Is it just Jenkins?
I think it is. Hang on, let me do a quick check. That's an easy thing for me to check.
I don't remember. And because you should subscribe there too. And the reason why is all of the SIGs, all of the official meetings, documentation, governance, all those things posted within usually a few days after the actual meeting. The meetings actually occur within Zoom.
That's right.
I think Zoom,
Yes.
Zoom or Hangouts. I can't remember which one it was.
Yep.
And then Mark does whatever Mark does to those, and then they get posted to YouTube. You learn a lot of information from watching those videos. A lot.
And you can scan forward. You can play it at 2x speed. You can do all sorts of things to be hyper efficient. We also post now summary agendas and links to the videos on community.jenkins.io. So if you go to community.jenkins.io and look for meetings as the tag, you'll see all sorts of meeting videos with the summary notes below. So you may say, oh, I don't want to spend time watching that. Fine, look at the notes, see what the notes have to say, and if there's something interesting, jump into it and watch the video.
Okay. Again, if you haven't subscribed over to the Jenkins channel, you should do that over on YouTube. Again, if you haven't subscribed here yet on CloudBees TV, please do that. The button's right underneath Mark if you're on a desktop. And click the bell too. When you click that bell and then select all, then you get notified on anytime there's new content there. So do that here, do that over on Jenkins. Anything else, Mark?
That's it. Thanks, Darren.
Okay. Cool. Thank you, Mark. And to everybody else, have a great rest of your week. We will see you back definitely in 4 weeks, but maybe before then. And that's the reason why you would want to go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you know when those next sessions happen. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. And if I push the right button, we can actually say goodbye. But you know what? I don't know what button to push. I think it's this one.